Now space, the final frontier. This is the story of NASA astronaut Terry Virts and his 16-year career in which orbited Earth 3,600 times, commanded a space shuttle mission and flew on the Soyuz before taking command of the International Space Station. With over 213 days in space, he is a man who has boldly gone where few men have gone before. But as our reporter Mark Hirst has been finding out, like the science fiction TV series Star Trek, none of it would be possible without an international commitment to space exploration.
Undocking confirmed. We're standing by for the initiation of the first of two separation burns complete.
The sound of the Soyuz TMA-15 undocking from the International Space Station in 2015 to begin its 18,000 mile-per-hour descent back to Earth. Aboard Commander Terry Virts, one of NASA's most experienced astronauts. Virts holds the record for the third longest continuous space mission in NASA history, spending 200 days in space. But Virts is best known for a tweet he gave from space in February 2015, following the death of Star Trek actor Leonard Nimoy. Virts held his hand up to the window of the space station and gave the Vulcan V salute back towards planet Earth, 400 kilometres below. Today, following his retirement from NASA last year, Colonel Virts spends his time giving talks about his work as a US Air Force pilot and his extensive experience as an astronaut. Earlier, I spoke to Commander Virts about his experiences in space and began by asking how easy it was for him working alongside his cosmonaut counterparts at Roscosmos.
Well, it was a great having cosmonauts and astronauts together. And honestly, for me, it was the highlight to be able to go down to the Russian segment and have dinner with my cosmonaut friends or just see them and hang out during the day and get a chance to speak a little bit of Russian.
NASA has been invited by Roscosmos to take part in the joint investigation into the Progress MC-04 mission failure. Can you tell us what specific expertise NASA brings to that investigation?
The concept of spaceflight is kind of a universal one. So NASA has lots of spaceflight experience, and we can bring people who understand, the principles of rocket motor operation or the dynamics of spaceflight, and sometimes having a second set of eyes on a problem helps. But whenever, NASA has an incident, it's usually the NASA experts that work on it, or whenever the Russians have an incident, it's usually their experts that work on it. But, that attests to the partnership that we have, that we can help each other in making spaceflight more safe and more reliable.
How damaging was the loss of this mission, and what contingencies are in place to cover for eventualities such as this?
Well, that's a great question for me personally, because during my mission, I flew in most recently in 2014 to 2015 on a 200-day mission. And in an 8-month period centered around my 7-month flight, we lost an American Cygnus vehicle, we lost a Russian Progress, and we lost an American SpaceX. So we had 3 cargo ship failures to the space station. And we had enough supplies on board that everything was uninterrupted. We had the mechanical equipment, spare parts was not a problem. There was enough food and clothes to last for the crew. To be honest, if a 4th vehicle had failed, we probably would have started to have to cut back in some way. So in this case, with just the 1 Progress failure, it's not a severe problem, but it's one of those things where there's enough spares for a couple of failures, but once you get beyond that number, then it becomes a problem.
The exploration of space is a hugely technologically challenging field for all of the agencies. How closely do the agencies monitor what their counterparts are doing in an effort to improve their own approach to space exploration?
Well, the space station has been a great example of that. I mean, Russia, America have worked together really well for over 2 decades now, along with the Japanese, the Europeans, and the Canadian space agencies. And so we cooperate very well. There are no secrets. We share each other's technical data and how the equipment. We have to, because our astronauts are trained to operate the other people's equipment, and all of our equipment is attached together as one spaceship. There's no, we call it the Russian segment or the Japanese module or whatever, but the reality is it's one spaceship flying in orbit around the Earth, and so we have to be very aware of what each other are doing.
There has been speculation for a while about a manned mission to Mars. Would that kind of mission be one that you would consider undertaking if you had the opportunity?
I'd love to go to Mars. I would. The one thing I always say, President Kennedy gave the vision in the early 1960s that this nation commits itself to achieving the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. And that was my favorite part of his speech, was the returning him safely to the Earth. So I think if I were going to be part of a man to Mars mission, I would want that return safely to Earth as part of the plan.
For many people, you have what most people would think of as the dream job, but it's not come without a lot of work and effort. What advice would you give people listening to this who are contemplating a career as an astronaut or a cosmonaut?
Look, I wanted to be an astronaut since I was a kid. Millions of people around the world would love to do it. NASA just got 18,000 applications for our most recent class, so there's a lot of interest in the job. The one piece of advice that I tell people is that they need to do what they love. There's not like a certain, you have to do this or you have to do that. You don't want to start doing things just to check a box to get the job. You have to do what you love, and that will make you good at what you're doing and make you great at what you're doing. And if you don't want to do things that are not, your calling. The other thing is that for your listeners in the UK, for decades, unfortunately, the government of Britain did not support human spaceflight, and that's changed recently. And as you know, Tim Peake just got back from a trip on the space station, and Tim's a good friend of mine. And so that's great news for your listeners in the UK that, there is a path to becoming an astronaut that way. I actually flew with a gentleman who was born and raised in England and then became an American citizen in order to become an astronaut, Nick Patrick. So in the past, you had to kind of become American in order to fly with NASA, but nowadays that's not true anymore for the UK.
And finally, although space exploration is a serious business, I'm assuming there has been the occasional amusing incident during your extensive career. Is there any you can share with our listeners?
That was the best part of my flight. Actually, on Friday nights we'd have dinner together as a crew, and we would have Russian language lessons. I would have it with Anton Shkaplerov and Sasha Samokujev and Gennady Padalka, and they would teach me Russian that I probably would not normally learn in a classroom. But we would play jokes on each other. Before the next crew came up, I rearranged their clothes, and anyway, we would call people on the intercom to make it sound like the ground was calling them and try and get them to, call up Houston or one of the mission control centers on the ground. And anyway, there are some minor pranks that we do and try and have fun. Because like I said, my flight was 200 days, and, that's definitely not just serious the whole time. We're human beings, and it was actually a really good time in space.
Commander Terry Virts, many thanks for joining us on World in Focus.
Great talking to you.